Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Jeremy Smith. Sorry guys, I've been a bit absent lately. I've been working on lots of new changes for this YouTube channel. I was hoping to have everything all completed by now, but that hasn't happened just yet. Meanwhile, cameras have continued to be released and there's lots of things I've wanted to take a look at. So I decided that I would not keep on waiting until I get everything all completed. I decided to go ahead and start making some more videos, just kind of in a slightly improvised way. That's why I am off camera today. But in a future video very soon, I'll be telling you guys about all the changes coming up, and things will be very, very awesome. In the meantime though, let's go ahead and take a look at Nikon's new D3400. Taking a closer look at the D3400, the first thing you realize is that it's pretty much the exact same minuscule size of Nikon's previous cameras in this range, such as the D3300 and 3200. Now, if you're a Nikon nerd like me, you might have noticed something else about this camera whenever you took it out of the box, and that is the fact that this one actually uses a black shutter release button. Now, for all of you that aren't Nikon nerds, you're thinking, okay, he's lost it. What is the big deal about that? Well, as it turns out, in previous releases, Nikon used this black shutter release on just their higher end and their mid-range cameras. But as more time has gone on, they've started using these across their entire range. And I think the first entry-level camera that used this was like the D5500 or something. So anyways, it's interesting to see that we have that on the 3400 now. The other thing about this camera is that, it's very, very close to what we've seen in the past. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, whenever we went from the 3100 to the 3200, I was like super, super impressed because we saw this big difference in image quality. We went from a 14 megapixel camera up to a 24 megapixel camera, and we saw better high ISO performance and so forth. Unfortunately, though, we don't really see that type of jump forward these days. When we went from the 3200 to the 33, the 3300 had the newer XP4 processor, and it had the ability to do things like 60 frames a second in 1080. So it was a nice little upgrade. At first glance, though, this 3400 doesn't look like as much of an upgrade, and I was kind of like, this is it? Because we don't see a whole lot of improvement at first. This camera still uses the XP4 processor. It still appears to use the exact same 24 megapixel sensor that was found in the 3300. And of course, there's no new video options or anything. So I was like, well, what's up with this? Well, the good news is there are a few little upgrades here and there. The first one, though, that we'll talk about is Nikon's new Snap Bridge technology. And basically, this is a newer app that they have now to transfer photographs from the camera to a smart device. And we will be taking a look at this app in a future video. I haven't done all the testing on it yet. Basically, Nikon implements it using Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, or both, on some of their cameras. On cameras like the D500, that camera gets Bluetooth and Wi-Fi capability. The Bluetooth is a low-power Bluetooth. So basically you have the ability to, and I'm opening the car door accidentally. You basically have the ability to use the Bluetooth to transfer photographs to the camera, from the camera to the smart device, even when the camera is powered off. It doesn't use a whole lot of battery life. But then you can use the Wi-Fi capabilities for things like giving you live view to a smart device and so forth. The 3400 just has the Bluetooth portion of this, so it doesn't have the Wi-Fi, and you basically can't do the live view shooting, but you can still transfer your pictures. So I'm kind of disappointed that you can't do live view anymore, because that's something that obviously you could do on the previous cameras in this range with the wireless adapter. But we'll be talking about that in a future video, as I mentioned. The other thing that is nice on this camera, this is something that Nikon has not made a big deal at all about, and I think that's a pity actually. Someone in marketing is doing a poor job in my opinion, because The other thing about this camera that's nice is this new type of lens. This is still an 18-55. Now, whenever Nikon released this camera, they released a new technology on the 18-55 and on their new 70-300, and that is this AFP technology. Basically, this is kind of akin to Canon STM lens technology. So if you're shooting video, you have the ability to have completely silent autofocus. I'm going to show you guys how this works. I'm going to record a little clip here on this camera, then I'll insert it into the video so you guys can see. But basically, what happens with this is, if you're on continuous focus in video mode, you can focus the camera, or have the camera focus automatically rather, and you don't have any type of autofocus sound. So let's see, I'm going to be quiet a second, let you guys kind of listen. I'll hold this by the mic. And it keeps on focusing, and there's pretty much no audible sound at all. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really, really big deal. It's a huge improvement over Nikon's previous lenses in this range. Now, it's still not quite like Canon's focus technology, because Canon's using that dual pixel CMOS technology where they have phase detect sensors built onto the autofocus sensor, onto the image sensor. But on this one, you're still using a contrast-based detect system, so you don't have the benefit of phase detect. So it's not quite as fast as the Canon system, but it is still extremely, extremely good. And perhaps in a future video, we'll kind of test it side by side. It's also interesting that on Canon, you have to go to higher-end cameras to be able to get that type of focus technology. You have to go up to like the 80D to get it. Now on the Rebels, like the T6i, you still have autofocus, but it's a little bit different system than a dual pixel autofocus. It still uses phase detect points on the sensor though. But even something like a T6i is a noticeably more expensive camera. You know, you're up into the $800 USD price range. And then on your entry-level Rebels, like the T6, you don't have autofocus at all. So I think this is actually going to make the Nikon compete very well. So if you're looking for a camera, you know, around this $500, $600 price range, I still think that this Nikon is going to be the way to go. Another thing about this lens is that it doesn't have any switches on it anymore. So it doesn't have an autofocus suspended focus switch, and it doesn't have a VR switch. So on this one, you actually go into your menu here to change things. This is a little bit different than it was in the past. Let's see here. So you can see there AF mode. Actually, no, that's the wrong thing. Focus mode. That's what we want. So you can see we have our viewfinder, AFS, AFC, and then we can go to manual focus. So it's now done into the menu there. You don't have the physical switches. Kind of interesting. Now, a couple other things about this camera that I noticed in the specs. Number one, this camera, in a very strange move, it doesn't have a built-in sensor cleaning mechanism. And frankly, all I have to say about that is shame on you, Nikon. There's no logical reason for that. You know, pretty much all cameras at this point have had that for, I don't know, the past 5, 6, 7 years now. So it's obviously a cost-cutting measure on Nikon's part. I can't think of any other reason why they'd remove it. Yeah, I pretty much have nothing positive to say about that aspect of it. So yeah, I thought that was a bit odd. Everything else though is about the same on this camera. It still uses an SD card slot. It still uses the exact same ENEL 14 battery that we all know and love. So that's still the same. The other thing that's kind of controversial about this camera is that the battery life is much, much higher than what it used to be. And people were wondering, man, why is the battery life so much higher? They didn't use a different battery. It still uses the exact same processor and sensor. How did they achieve that? Well, once again, I have nothing nice to say about this, but basically they decided to cut the flash power in half. And so whenever cameras are tested for battery certification, basically they take about half the pictures with flash and half the pictures without flash. And so now, if you have a camera with a less powerful flash, then it's going to perform better in the battery test. So this one is about half the battery power, about half the flash power of the D3300. So that's how they achieve that. So kind of strange there. Aside from the weird little bits about sensor cleaning and built-in flash power, for those of you that are going to be using flash a lot, you're going to get a better flash than the built-in one anyway. But aside from these random little cost-cutting measures and sort of weird things that Nikon has done, I still say this is a very, very solid camera, especially when we have this new, faster autofocus, with the lens and everything for video. I still think this is a very solid camera, especially at this price point. The one thing that I must say about all DSLR manufacturers these days, whether it be Nikon or Canon or anyone else, mirrorless cameras are becoming a very, very big thing, and for good reason. So if we start comparing things like the size and autofocus performance on mirrorless cameras to something like this, I must say that, Nikon and Canon, they definitely need to kind of get off their butts and and kind of think more about this. This 3400, it has the same 11-point autofocus system that first debuted in about 2002 in the Nikon D200. So yeah, I think that they need to step it up a bit. It'd be nice to see the 39-point focus system from Nikon's 5000 series cameras in the 3000 series as well, at a bare minimum. Just because these newer mirrorless cameras, they have focus systems with focus points cover the entire array. A lot of people who are looking at entry-level DSLRs. Yes, having more lenses is an advantage. But a lot of people that are looking at DSLRs these days, they're not going to be thinking about a lot of lenses. When is an entry-level photographer going to need an 800mm 5.6 or something like that? They're not. Most people are going to buy their camera and maybe 2 extra lenses to go with it, maybe a fast prime, maybe a telephoto, and that's all they're going to buy. And I think that Nikon really needs to consider this whenever they're designing their cameras. And so more lens selection is not really a valid comparison on these entry-level models as far as I'm concerned. So I think Nikon has quite a ways to go. I think this series, it's still very solid, don't get me wrong, but I think that they need to put a little bit more innovation into things. We'll be taking a look at the snap bridge technology in a future video. I'll show you guys how it works on this camera and how it works on the D500. I've been kind of waiting until the app matures and so forth. If there's any other questions that you have about this camera, write me in the comments below. And of course, you guys know I love comparing different cameras, like camera A to camera B. I plan on comparing this to something like the maybe 5000 series cameras, like the 5500, and perhaps some other cameras. I'd like to compare it to a mirrorless camera. But what mirrorless camera do you guys think I should compare it to? I've been considering comparing it to something like a Sony a6000 or something like that. Anyways, write me in the comments. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Jeremy Smith, signing off.